Everybody else, good morning.
Morning, Ammar.
Hey, how are we doing?
Yes.
It's and so this is Christmas, and another year over. I'm just sending Mr. Patton the link. He doesn't seem to have it. And anyway, you're listening to Amar and
Jalf.
live on our weekly radio show. Gosh, Jeff, you look as if you've been up. It's the first time this year. You look as if you look. Um, I don't feel like that either, so I can't say you look how I feel. But um, have you stopped using the cream? What's happened?
Oh, don't know. It's probably the just the rigors of the month, really.
Rigors of the month,
Yeah,
not the rigors mortis.
yeah. It's just a hectic month, isn't it? Where you just
It is a hectic
so much
month.
going on, and everything just happens in this month. There's all the madness with hospitality, but then you have it's just chaos,
Mm.
deliveries, um, getting things on time, and you know, things. Imagine why you got a delivery off. You need X amount of cases of stock, and then you need them. You order it, and it's supposed to come, but then because of the getting into the city, getting around, and the delays of that whole chain has a massive impact and adds so much pressure in the operations.
It's just more challenging every single year,
Yeah.
and the biggest I think the biggest challenge is just people. Jeff, to talk very bluntly,
Well, it's not
it's
always well. It's obviously if you think about the city centre, right? Why on earth
it's
are
not
they making
always
so
people. Did you just say it's not
it's
always
not
people?
always the people. It's if you think about the when decision makers are making decisions on a city and to change the whole infrastructure of it in terms of the roads and um, having these new schemes where there's congestion this and congestion that, and is there a real need for all of that? They're going to argue that it is, but it just causes so much disruption to the people that are in the city centre on a day-to-day basis doing have the businesses. They're not taking into consideration the consequences that they have, those decisions have. So whilst people, yes, but also decisions by, well, I guess it's decisions by people.
Sorry, that was everything that you've just said. I was sat there thinking you haven't contradicted or suggested anything different
Yeah,
to.
but
So I'm talking about people generally. Doesn't matter whether it's people there, people over here, someone somewhere is making a decision um, that impacts us.
of course, and but then should it be the case though that people can make decisions representing like our city council, which are not in the best interests of the people of that
Well,
city?
I don't think it's our city council, as in, I mean, it's easy to
Well,
criticize the city council when Mark Patton's joining us this morning. He's a wonderful leader from the city council. So,
no, point I'm trying to make them, I just thought that it is our city council,
yeah,
and
you're right.
they should be representing the city, the people in the city, the businesses in the city. And whilst they would have a questionnaire and try and say that, yes, we've got your input, but the reality is, have they really, and are those decisions for the best interest of the city? And can that be made by a person? Because as a group, as a team, as an institution, those decision makers shouldn't really impact the city in a bad way because collectively they should be impacting the city very positively.
Mm. Um, yeah. Anyway, it is quite interesting and challenging. Um, we've got a presentation here as well. It's Christmas, Jeff. I feel as if I haven't had the chance to appreciate Christmas. Um, is what I feel.
Well, you will on Christmas Day probably. I mean, it's also it feels festive, but then you always need that snow, don't you, Mom? You need a bit of
Yeah,
snow.
well, I don't know. I agree to make it feel Christmassy. But anyway, sorry, my point was up until today, because we've just it's the staff are in, the team are in today. We've just exchanged some gifts and things like that, and it made me feel nice. It made me feel a bit festive, and it's Black Eyed Friday, so I think I'll be heading into town at lunchtime-ish or
Mm.
something like that, and seeing and having some food just with some friends and things like that. So
Good.
you better don't be late, Jeff.
Hmm?
Um,
Where you off? Where you after? Where you after, Mom?
the
Anywhere nice?
club,
Oh yeah.
the club.
Cool.
Um, so but there's a seat with your name on it.
You joking?
No, why?
Hmm?
Why?
Well, I didn't get no RSVP invites and stuff.
You're permanent. You don't need any of that. No, I'm not joking. Genuinely, there's a. Anyway, let's get into the show. It is Christmas. It's on the Spice FM on the 20th of December. What's going on? Government financial boost for small and medium house builders. Skills for growth, top agenda for business leaders and government. £2 billion boost to growth as UK joins major trade group. UK interest rates held, business face monthly hike of £209 per employee. It's a mixed bag. It's very political, these headlines, as
Mm.
diplomatic even is what they are. Um, so it's interesting. Um, I'm hoping that Mark is going to be joining us. He sent me a message saying I haven't had a link, and I've just sent him hit. Let's see if he is joining us because we're expecting him, and hopefully he will be joining us. Um, so, Jeff, it is the run up to Christmas. What's the highlights? What's the lowlights? So you're seeing, as I understand it, the traffic conspiracy was compounded now by Gateshead flyover closing.
Yeah, apparently something just collapsed, and they don't know how long that's going to take until it stays as is because they need to find the money from somewhere.
Hmm.
Apparently, that's the word on the street. And that is just causing like it just like you said, Ammar, it's adding to that whole issue. So there's that. But on a positive note, I have to say that I feel whilst if you have a look at the whole year, Ammar, during the summer, many months and weeks, I would walk through town and I would think, oh my God, where is everybody? Literally, I
Yeah,
could walk through town, on an afternoon,
yeah,
and I wouldn't cross actually, I would only cross one or two people, and it was really strange, and it was a very nervous feeling because thinking that where is everybody? Is the economy really hitting people so hard that people have actually they're not around because I couldn't. But that is completely flipped on its head during this month because the streets are busy, the city centre is busy, lots of people are around as you expect it to be at this time of the year. But only difference is, Ammar, compared to previous years, you would the quieter months that I talked about. It was never as quiet as that on an ordinary kind of summer afternoon. So I think that's really, really positive. So people are out. There you go. There's Mark. People are out and
hey,
they seem jolly. And I think it does feel very festive. Good morning, Mark.
talking about festive, jolly markets. Is it not the last day um, of everything?
Of everything. I think that's maybe overstating the case a little bit. Certainly the end of term for most schools. Some of them finished, I think, yesterday. But most schools finished today, yes. Good morning, both. Lovely to see.
Morning, sir. Yes, apologies about that. You probably got my out of office and thought it's not happening, possibly. And anyway, uh, technology, invitations, things like that. Um, you're here. So, and it's wonderful that you are. Jaff was just giving us a bit of a lowdown on city centre activity. And I must admit, December's been so busy. I don't know where all of the people have come from, Jeff, in the city centre.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not just peaks and troughs. It's constant,
Mm.
and it's been like that every night, every day,
Yep.
every place as
Mhm.
well.
Yeah, I can definitely vet that 100%. I've seen that, for myself with my own eyes. So when you see it, you have to believe it. So something fantastic has happened during the festive season. So that's a really, really good thing. We just hope that it is such a short period. It lasts, a month or 3 weeks, really. And then we'll have to see. We just hope that there isn't that big crash in January. And we hope that it's not that huge peak and trough that we usually get, and it's a bit better in January than what it usually is.
Yes. Mark, how does it feel for you? Sorry, before we ask any questions, please, for the purpose of process, tell us who you are, what you do, why you do it. Mark.
Okay, morning everyone. So I'm Mark Patton. I'm the Assistant Director of Education here in the City Council in this fantastic city of ours. And I agree with Jeff, really. I think, the feel out and about, as part of my job, I get out and about into schools quite a bit and travel around the city quite a lot. And, I'm very privileged to be able to do that. And even during the kind of normal school day, the working day, it's been incredibly busy this second half term. So since we came back after October, the October half term break, so November, and especially, Jeff, I think you're right, December just seems to have been manic in a good way in terms of just the volume of people, and volume therefore of traffic, which has its ups as well as its downs, but also on public transport. I'm really pleased to see people using buses, metros, as well as seeing more more bikes and other forms of transport around the city. I think we've been a little unusual this year as well, which might explain some of the more recent increases in footfall to have our two universities open quite late into December. Normally they would have finished a week or two ago,
Okay.
and many students are only went home this week, which I think is great for them, great for the city, great for businesses, but also just it adds an extra dimension to how the city feels, doesn't it?
Mm. That's very interesting, Mark. And Mark, do you know if that was done deliberately then, or was that just how things fell this year?
I don't know if it was a deliberate policy or not. It just so happens that normally most universities will finish second, latest third week in December, but normally around the end of the second week. This year it's been a little bit later. Not sure why. I haven't asked the question, to be honest, yeah. But it certainly meant more younger people out and about than I would normally expect at this time of the year, which is great.
Yeah, I think
Actually, yeah, I've seen a bit of that. I think the thing that I have noticed was, and it fits exactly that demographic, where these weren't just younger people within families; they were just younger people, which ties into them being probably students, as I would be appropriate to surmise. Jeff, how busy have all of your venues been?
Yeah, they've all been busy, Ammar. Very busy city centre restaurants. Jasmine has been quieter, but it always is historically because it's not in the city centre, and people, no matter how much you try and persuade them, say, well, you can have your Christmas party in Jesmond, you know, it's only like a couple of 5 minutes drive into the city centre. But I think everyone wants to be in the hustle and bustle, because that's obviously something that's part of their memory, isn't it? So yeah, they've been good. I think most restaurants that I see and I speak to, everyone's been very, very busy.
I mean, I like probably both. Well, no, Jeff, you would be very, very busy, of course, as a provider, but as a consumer, I've been out and about, as I'm sure most people have, with Christmas holidays and meeting. Excuse me, I've got a bit of a chest infection, which is taking a little while.
I'm sorry to hear that.
No, it's fine. I feel okay, but it's kind of just lingering here and makes breathing a bit tricky. And I'm kind of half deaf in one ear, and I just need putting to sleep, really. But I've been out and about with family and friends and Christmas do's, and you're right, it's been really nice. I think the weather's helped this year as well. We've not had that really, really cold snap, which which we normally have, excuse me, just before Christmas. Then again, we have a little bit of a lull, and then January again ends up getting cold again. And I think that's helped to have people out and about. It's been relatively dry.
Yeah. Can I ask, Mark, your experience in restaurants when you have been going in? How have you found them during this service period in terms of the service offering and your general experience?
No complaints at all. I mean, quite the opposite. My most recent visit to a restaurant meant that it was very, very busy in the bar area of that restaurant, and in fact, too busy for our party. It was very difficult to hear ourselves speak. So we very kindly asked the staff if there was another space for us to go, and explained why. And they were really accommodating, absolutely fine. Said, just give us 15 minutes and we'll, there's a couple of people leaving from this table and a couple from that table. We'll pull those together. And we had a group of probably about eight or nine of us. And they were very, very accommodating and moved us somewhere quieter. Service was great. Food was great. Hospitality was good.
Good.
Yeah, no complaints at all. I've been to, I think, 5 in December, 5 different venues.
Good.
You've been out and about then, Mark, is what you have. You sound a bit like my wife. I was reflecting on and you know, her indoors. She's not her indoors. She's more her outdoors, is what she is, and it's brilliant because it's nice that people are getting out and with their friends and things like that. But and then obviously the city centre, Jalf Wednesday, reinvigorated by that football result as well.
Yeah.
You know, it's brilliant to see that. But yes, I've I suppose sadly missed the going out as much as I probably would like to have done. But on the occasions that we have, we've gone out families, we've done things like the Theatre Royal. So we went and seen. It's a tradition. We go there, watch that, have some food beforehand, and then we were at the football last weekend, and then went down to the quayside for some food. But I mean, yes, the football probably skews it a little bit, but it's consistently and constantly busy, which is wonderful. And Mark, hearing you sort of suggest that the quality hasn't been impacted. You know,
I haven't in the 5 times I've been out in the city, I've not noticed that at all, either in terms of service or in terms of the you know, the food and the atmosphere of the venues. No, not at all.
Well, that's really good, Mark. The reason why I asked that question is just during that time of the year. If you imagine you're doing this extra level of business that you haven't done throughout the year, where do you get the people from? How do you get them trained? If the students are here and if you've got 50,000 students that leave, that means they're leaving employment. They could be part of that team of yours that you need, but they have to go on their, you know, university breaks and get off home. And for the festivities and stuff. And sometimes that is the real world. I guess from the guest perspective, it's not for them to understand or suffer from that, but the reality is it makes it challenging. But I think it's good that the operators or the places that you've been to, they've found coping mechanisms for all of that. And it is we used to call Christmas the harvest back in the day. You work all year for the harvest, which is in December. It's not quite the traditional way of looking at it, because it used to be like, I think my memories from Christmas over the years, it was certainly probably more chaotic than what it is at the moment. And we're talking on these lines just because I think overall there has been slowdown in the economy over the last year or so, 100%. And it's nice that we feel as though there's a bit of normality back in December. And we just hope that 2025 doesn't lead to this. Every time you put on the radio, they talk about cost of living crisis, A, B, C, and D. And we hope that we face less of the problems that we have had this year. Hopefully 25 will be a lot more positive.
And I think as a city, I think where we've attracted some quite big events this year, which I think is helpful for everybody, including for businesses, because with those big events come obviously more footfall. We've got some big events coming up next year. So, fingers crossed, things are finally might seem to be returning to what we were used to as a core city in this country, with lots of big things happening and lots of people wanting to be here with their friends and with their family.
Yep.
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, without putting a Scrooge hat on and turning a bit humbug, it does feel quite literally, from an economic perspective, the storm or the calm before the storm, because if you look, talking to employees, so I'm particularly surprised at the that employers are coping, given the fact with the skills, not just skills, attitude, is probably work readiness, work enablement, whatever you want to describe it. Every single employer, I've spoken to probably 12 separate employers across 12 separate sectors, industries this week, and every single one of them is struggling with the quantity and quality of people. So I'm pleasantly surprised, and I think it's wonderful that that's not reflecting in to the city centre. And actually, the couple of times we've went for meals, you're absolutely right, Mark. They've been really good, and it hasn't been that's a more mature person versus a younger person or whatever it is. All of them been consistent. Possibly, I would say or argue a lot of them are also possibly students. Jalf, would you agree? A lot of your workforce?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, hospitality has historically always been known for it's not really a professional closed shop industry, as they would call it. So you are reliant on people in between jobs, a lot of casual staff members, students, and A, B, C, and D. So I think the international students for us certainly are huge in terms of us having flexibility in the business. That does help us a lot. Without the international, so what's happened is, the big picture is, following Brexit, the Eastern Europeans, they just stopped coming into the country, and Eastern Europeans formed your workplace for hospitality, for sure, front of house and back of house also. And then I think when that market, when they stopped coming, obviously the international students. I think something happened with international students that opened up the floodgates for international students, because there was a period where they weren't letting them in as well. And I think that's made a massive difference. I think what also made a difference was giving them the ability to find a job in their careers, giving them a kind of post-study work time. And whilst they are looking for jobs, we have lots of students that are looking for jobs in their professional careers that they would like to pursue. But in the interim, they are working until they find that. And I think that helps us, and it gives them time as well. So I think that's a nice rule that works for everybody. And we always say to them, hopefully, you're going to get the opportunity to progress into your career path. So look for jobs whilst you're working here. We have no problem with that, but just give your best whilst you're here. And we would love you to go on to your careers and be architects and engineers and everything else that you've hoped and you dream to do. So that's important.
I agree, and actually reflecting on that, and I think, you know, as an employer, if I was purely putting my employer hat on, my best, well, the people that I've recruited primarily over the last 12 months have been international graduates. So we've given them jobs at the end of their the postgraduate, so they've done masters, and they're brilliant. And I'm saying any graduate who's done whatever they do, but international sort of individuals who have come here, there's this real work commitment, enthusiasm, and things like that. Yeah, well, there is, but it's equally, conversely, because I'm such a huge, we've got a couple of apprentices and supporting them. I think it's right, but I think, Mark, we're gonna pass over to Mark in a second. And sorry that you're coughing a lot. Don't worry about coughing live. It's only natural and authentic, and makes it feel a bit more Christmassy as well, Mark, because everyone just gets slightly unwell, don't they, whenever they switch off. But I just feel as if the whole support for people from a skills perspective is there, but not from a mindset and a ambition, aspiration side of things. Hasn't been as effective. There is a real hunger in other countries. Yes, these other countries aren't as developed as ours. And as individuals, they probably it's a massive deal spending all of that money to come here to get educated, and then they want to try and sort of do something with it. But Mark is so far more incredibly effective at illustrating and demonstrating, and simply he's far better educated because he was a teacher than me to explain what I'm thinking, I think. But in essence, I feel what is that categorization? And forgive me, Mark, when people aren't necessarily looking for work, but they're economically inactive.
Yeah. So I think there was a couple of really interesting points there. I think there is something. So you mentioned graduates, and I think there is something around, particularly in the younger bracket. What do I mean by that? Kind of 30s and below, I guess. Sometimes called the millennial and post-millennial generation, who have a very different view and outlook on career and jobs and employment compared to the likes of ourselves and previous generations, and are very clear often about what they do want a job to provide for them. And I think that's an interesting shift as well. What they want their job or their jobs to provide for them, and often that's flexibility now, very much flexible, and also what they are willing to give, what they are willing to commit, and perhaps what they're not willing to commit any further than perhaps previous generations have been either expected to do, or it's just been part of the work ethic in their family or their community. And let me illustrate what I mean by that. So, for example, I think if you speak to most people who have been in full-time employment since they left school, whenever that is, their understanding of what full-time employment means in terms of the hours they work is very, very different to what you would get if you had a conversation with a 21, a 22, 23, a 27-year-old. I think expectations are different around that. And that's not to say one is bad and one is good. They're just very different. And I think what that does bring to people like yourselves as employers is actually a richer market of people who are able to work in very different ways, and willing to work in different ways. And I can't see any disadvantage in that at all for you as employers. I think the second point I would make around what you said a few moments ago, Ammar, around economically inactive, is I think in the city we are trying really, really hard to make sure that when people find employment that suits them, that it rewards them in a way which means that they feel that they can work, and can earn money to support themselves and their families in a way which is helpful not only to themselves but to everybody else, and not find other ways of earning money which perhaps would be less helpful. Does that make sense?
No, I was just going to ask, can you just elaborate a little? When you say that find a job that's gonna be rewarding, are you talking about from a financial perspective, or are you talking about just a sense of belonging in a particular workplace, which is also of real value, and finding an environment where they're happy because of the colleagues around them, they'll all find a nice togetherness and A, B, C, and D? Because if it's just a money perspective, I think that's already set by the minimum wage. And I feel as an employer and speaking to other employers, it's unless the basic minimum wage is pretty damn high these days. And to earn more than that, you have to be of a particular level, a particular skill set. And that you would need to, for us, you would need to prove your worth. And we pay lots of people above the minimum wage, of course, but they're at a particular skill set. So so could you, was it to do with finances, your point, or was it
No, I think yes, I think it's both, to be fair, Jalf. I think there is something around, the city's commitment to, the real living wage, the national living wage, and they are different things, and I know you know that they're different, but also there is something about this flexibility that I think employers, how would I want to say this? I think employers understand now more than perhaps they did in the past that they have to be flexible as well.
What, in terms of?
In terms of working patterns, in terms of, and I'm not necessarily saying in your sector,
Yeah.
Per se, but I think generally employers particularly in some other sectors have been a bit slower to recognize that actually the workforce that they want doesn't necessarily want to give what they're expecting.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of work patterns and work ethic and going above and beyond.
Mm.
I think a lot of people would be happy to do, but not necessarily all.
Mm.
Yeah. I think there's no, thank you for that, Mark, and I totally, absolutely agree with you. I feel as if, uh, and it's purely an observation, and just for the purposes of our radio show, all of our conversations are personal. We're having a very open conversation because I think it's helpful to do that. But there's a couple of points for me. Yeah, the squeeze, the cost of living, Jalf, right? If I look at anybody, the cost of living is huge now,
Mm.
right? And to live, sadly, people aren't getting paid enough, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's a critical point. I
Yep.
know of people, the work that we do with certain communities where people have two, three jobs and they still cannot afford to feed or turn the lights. They're still struggling. These are minimum wage type jobs. They're trying to fit in between caring for children, working in the evenings, doing this, relying on help, all of that. So the cost of living is one of the biggest issues, generally speaking. The second point, though, from an employer, there's a bit of a disconnect, right? Because the cost of doing business is now significantly increasing, right? So as an employer, I'm sat here thinking, actually, some of the activities that we do, some of the services, they're just not viable. We pay a living wage to all of our staff. We've done that. We committed to that. But we've struggled with some of the services. And the third point, Mark, around your people, employers need to be a bit more flexible. The sad part to that, and I'm using the term sad, maybe it's not the right term to use, is that consumers are even more demanding now. So there's a real disconnect between how much people have to pay to live, how much employers can afford to pay, whilst satisfying the demand from people as consumers. Because actually, I do want to talk to somebody. It's a matter of fact, there was this furor. In fact, I was involved in it in the late 90s, early 90s. There was this big drive towards cost and efficiency for call centers. They were shifted offshore, right? Everyone here, all of a sudden, was complaining that they weren't getting to speak to somebody here. In fact, call centers still deal with that complaint whenever you get somebody, what? Can I not just talk to someone in the UK? And it's like, these are, prevalent challenges where consumers are demanding certain things. You can't, and you're right, you can't flex to go hospitality, or can I work from home? When you work in a restaurant or a bar, there's those type of challenges. So I wouldn't say there's one particular issue or challenge that you could just simply say, well, let's focus on that and let's fix that. It's a whole combination. And then the ambitions and aspirations, I feel as if there's been a period of time where we've possibly, I wouldn't say encouraged, but just enabled people to become slightly more economically inactive as well. Because there's a desire, or actually, I can't afford to go to work for some people, because if they did, they'd be worse off.
I'm not.
Anyway,
I'm.
that's
I'm
for a
not.
comment.
I'm not going to comment on that.
I don't want you to.
That's a
I don't
political
want you
matter.
to. But anyway, I'm just saying it's not just one thing. Coming on to what we wanted to do this morning was actually, and we've only got 15 minutes. I'm going to share this because this was the presentation that Kevin put together. We're featuring a special guest, Mr. Mark Patton. Should always be a Mr. there. But we're reviewing 2024 and educating excellence. Sorry, I didn't even click share. You didn't see what I was talking to or at. You can now. Here you are, and I just wanted to talk about this part, review of 2024, because we've spoken quite a bit, broadly, generally, and good and bad. But actually, Mark, you and I, you far more, and me as a spectator, have seen some wonderful things going on, haven't we? As in within education, within the city, within schools, universities, training, and some of the things that you're enabling. So we didn't touch upon this, but supporting those further from education, employment, wherever that is the right thing to do. And actually, as an employer, Jaff, and I'm going to pick on you. Yes, I'm an employer, and it's something that we're looking at. There are probably, and I use this very crude term, 80-20 rule, right? So 80% of the population are able to go to school, able to work, able to do whatever, and then there's a minority that have additional needs. They might describe them as special educational needs. They might be disabled, less abled, whatever that is. But actually, they're desperate to work. They are desperate to be given an opportunity. They don't want to be labelled. And for me, there's a real unique opportunity to address some of the skills and attitude and aptitude challenges that employers complain about by supporting this part of our community. And it's something that you're doing, isn't it, Mark, through the local authority, and it's something that you're championing through the Progression Forum and things like that as well.
Well, I think yes, trying to keep progressing, moving forward. I think you're right. There is still a group of children and young people in our schools for whom, let's call it the standard model just doesn't work for one reason or another. They need or require something different. And so I think what our schools in the city and our educational providers in the city, so I'm talking all the way from early years, so preschool, childminding, nursery, all the way through to school, and then college, and then education, and then ultimately into your world of trainers and employers who are continuing to educate people, are becoming really good at is having those conversations with individuals, understanding precisely what those needs might be, and then accommodating them in some way, and having that open and honest discussion. In terms of my world in education, or schools, I think are really good at doing that. And we have a range of different schools across the city, which brings diversity and a great offer for parents and children in terms of the ability to choose which school or schools they want to apply to for their children. So I think you're right. We're trying to make the choices available as broad as possible in order for people to make as much progress as possible towards their next step, whatever that might be, whether that be moving from nursery into primary school, or primary into secondary school, or secondary school to college, or into training or employment, or college into university, and then out. Whatever that next step is for you on your journey, I think our providers, I'll use that wider term, are getting better. And there's lots of examples I could give you, around individuals and groups. But the other thing I think it's worth noting today, because I'm just keeping an eye on the clock there, is you may have spotted on Tuesday of this week, the Children's Wellbeing and Schools Bill was introduced to Parliament. Now, as a set of employers, and through you and through this show, I would urge you to have a look at that bill. There are some really, really interesting bits in terms of proposed government shift in policy around children's well-being and around schooling in this country. And I'm happy to talk about those that are on the show in the new year, if that would be helpful. The bill is quite long. However, there is a really useful set of summary notes. Even that's quite long, at 120 odd pages, but actually it's quite useful.
What?
So I think there are some. The next sort of few years, one of the big things that happened in education this year is we've had a change in government, and I'm sure it's big for you as employers as well. Whatever the impact of that has been for you, we are certainly seeing that in education. And this bill is another example of the shifts that a new government is bringing into the country for good or ill, depending on your point of view. I make no comment about that. But the times they are a changing. To quote that song.
So Mark, this 120-page summary, are you able to summarize that in 30
Absolutely
seconds?
not, Jalf. Absolutely not.
Yeah, give us the headlines. Anyway, no, because we do want to talk about this. But Mark, why are you mentioning it? Because we're not aware of it. I am aware of it, but I'm not, if that makes sense. So I knew it'd come out. Haven't really looked into it. I know there was a bit of a very slight consultation on some of it and things like that. But in essence, no. You're being incredibly, as you are brilliantly, and a reflection on what a wonderful person you are, diplomatic. So I appreciate and respect that and admire that. But coming on to the point, why were you flagging that as a what?
So I think it comes from our fundamental understanding, and I think it's our shared understanding here on this call and also through the program to your listeners, that the citizens of tomorrow are our children. That's undoubtedly true. And one measure of how good a society is and how it treats its children and what it expects of its children. And this bill, providing it goes through Parliament and becomes law in its many ways and shapes and forms, will shape your workforce in the next generation or two. So I think almost by definition, as employers, as trainers, as providers of education and training, I think you should be interested in what this bill is proposing in terms of changes to how schools will run, how schools could be more flexible in what they deliver. And I'm talking there from a curriculum point of view, which should absolutely be, music to your ears as employers in broadening the options that schools and other providers might be able to offer going forwards. Because that, again, coming back to your 80-20, it's called the Pareto rule, I think, isn't it?
It is the Pareto rule, yes.
Going back to your 80-20 analogy, that 20% who would benefit from something different, I think this bill has huge potential to make things a lot better for that 20%. And also a lot better for the 80% who actually are quite happy with the status quo now, but it could be better.
Yeah, I was my concern with sort of tinkering, or it's probably far more than just tinkering, is the impact that it has. As an independent, apolitical person, not sat with any of my roles on or anything like that. I think the challenge is always from an observer's perspective is, governments come in and they want to change things for the sake of changing things because it wasn't their idea or whatever it is, and the impact that has. I did note there was a whole range of things that were reversed in regards to T levels and whatever else, and then qualifications and others, sort of put in place and whatever else. A couple of points, Mark. For me, the children are our future. Let them lead, give them love, and let them lead the way. I think that's a song, isn't it? It's because I believe the children are our future. Anyway, I don't sound like Whitney Houston, I'm sure of it, and I had to. But I did write down all of the words from that song a couple of months back, because I thought that's just a brilliant speech. It's like one of the best speeches you could ever give. And as both Jaff and I, regularly, I wouldn't say complain, we feed back or observe, that we want to support younger people, so they're coming through and influencing them and sharing some of that, and hence the passion that we have with volunteering and supporting initiatives and giving up our time and even resources and opportunities. And one of the things that Jaff and I will be looking at and talking about is how might we support some of these 20 as well as the 80 in certain environments, and how could you bring them in and showcase. I was talking just very briefly, so I've connected quite meaningfully with a wonderful person, Lisa Oppie. She was incredibly high up at the BBC. She's now in charge of Ubisoft Reflections, one of the biggest, best gaming providers in the world. And she's an incredible person because she recognizes the importance of culture, art, connection, and all of that with young people. And one of the things that she was highlighting is young people, ADHD or whatever special educational needs, young people with these traits are ideally suited for certain industries, and in particular like gaming and things like that, because of their methodological, can't even say the word, but anyway, they're really good at methodology is what they are. So there'll be certain things that they're brilliant at, and it's about activating and supporting them in that environment by giving them the support that they need more widely. So I just feel as if there's probably more we could and should do, but it needs to be a more structured, concerted approach where employers like Jalf, who are trying to balance, the business, offer the best quality of service and ensure that the customer experience is the best it can, are able to understand, okay, I'm happy to give up, some time, support, some activity. I know I'm going to have to support certain individuals more, but by doing so, I can see the value, the end value of my contribution.
I agree, and I think in my own clumsy way, I think what I was trying to say in response to that very last point you've made there, which is about diversity.
Yes.
And not just diversity in terms of a single measure, whatever we think, whether that's race or ethnic origin or gender, or we're talking in a lot more detail now from an employer's point of view. You've made a really good analogy with Ubisoft and also with the service industry. Yeah. And we kind of have done this for a long time when we interview people, as we try and sift and identify what characteristics are that will make the best server or the best cook or the best software engineer or the best person to try out this new handset that I've got for gaming. What kind of characteristics do they need? And this whole world of neurodiversity, which is, I think, what you were talking about earlier. Yes. I think employers have really got a hold of that at all kinds of levels and all kinds of sectors. And I think in education, we've really got a hold of it and understood, actually, there are some things that people are very, and some of them are quite niche, are gifted at. And 20, 30 years ago, we might have thought that they were quite odd.
Yes. We're run out of time.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. We've run out of time. 30 seconds. Mark, Merry Christmas. Thank you ever so much for everything you do and continue to do. The passion, the enthusiasm, and the impact you bring. Jalf, wishing you and all of your restaurants the very best, and all of your visitors and those wise men and wise women and wise everyone who follows you into your restaurants, the very best of Christmas. On behalf of Spice FM, Asian Business Connections, and all of us, all the very best. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, Jalf.
Bye-bye.
Have a
Take care,
everybody.
Bye-bye. Bye.